I was thinking, how cool would it be at this point to have David Milgaard on the show? To talk about Byron as a journalist and as a friend, and how the Tragically Hip song Wheat Kings came about. But David Milgaard just doesn't do interviews. Search the internet. I bet you can't find 5 interviews with David Milgaard. But how cool would it be to have him on the show? Sometimes, if a downhomer wishes really hard... Well, David Milgaard, thank you so much for being on Downhome Corner. I want to just tell you that it's an honor to have you on the show, and I think you're a hero and an inspiration to many Canadians. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Steve, for asking me to be on the show.
Now, you've known Byron Christopher for over 20 years now as a journalist, and then later as a good and loyal friend. What's your opinion of Byron as a journalist, and what did it mean to have him covering your story all those years ago?
Thinking back to my situation and my relationship with Byron, it kind of started in a strange way. I somehow got a card or something from him, and I remember that I was inside, and there was a friend of mine that ended up getting shot inside the prison. And I just wondered, about that situation. And I asked Byron if he would find out, just how long, this man had suffered before he died. They just shot everybody up inside, right? And I remember that. The second part is also kind of an interesting story, too. At one point I was really upset with my mom. I was upset with my lawyer, and I called Byron. I said, "Listen, I got a scoop for you. I fired my lawyer." And he said, "Well, have you done it yet, David?" And I said, "No, not yet." I said, "I'm mad at my mom. I'm mad at everybody." So I guess he didn't go with it, which was good, because I called him at the last minute. I said, "Byron, tell me that you didn't go with the story." And he said, "No, David, I didn't, because I just thought that, I would wait until I heard from you again." And after that, I was loyal to Byron. When I first got out, I made sure that Byron was the person that I would talk to. And I guess that was the first exposure Canadians, I don't know how to say Canadians. To me, it's like we're all a big family here in this country. And it was my first kind of exposure to everybody in the country. And I really liked Byron, the way he kind of handled things, and I admire him as a person, just because. The best way to talk about Byron is just say he has a very big heart. He's always reaching around and helping people wherever he is. He's always got somebody there that he's trying to make a difference in their lives.
Yeah, he actually cares, and he cared about your story as well, because he told me that he didn't run the story because he felt you were agitated, and he said he was going to wait and see what happened. So a lot of journalists would have just went ahead and, there's my scoop, I'm going to go with it, and, the retraction would have been another story, and we'll run with that, but that's not how Byron was.
Yeah, Byron's he's a pretty smart individual. And I also think that, I remember at one point he asked me to speak to some journalist students for him in Edmonton. And in doing a little bit of research before I did my talk, there's a lot of ethics involved in being a journalist. And I think I think those are the measures by which Byron was cautious, and I'm glad that he was.
He carries a lot of what we call East Coast values,
I like East Coast values. I've been down that way. I really, really have to be honest with you. Down in Newfoundland, right, it's kind of a special place, because you're always getting this Lord lifting Jesus boy, how are you? From total strangers, and you have to say, well, I'm all right. How are you? And it was really nice to, and it doesn't matter where you are, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. You're always going to find people there that are caring and kind. I think the majority of people are good people. And it took me a while to get my walking legs when I got out of prison to kind of realize that and kind of trust that. But, I did. And I don't know how to explain. It's just a matter of taking your life and putting it in order and having priorities and making sure that you're a person that is a doer and getting things done. Because if you really make up your mind to be a doer, you can do anything. You really can with your life.
Mm. Well, like Byron and you and Byron have become friends over the years, and he's been a champion for human rights as well, and for the wrongly convicted as well as you are.
Yeah, he has been. I know that Byron has and continues to make efforts to assist the wrongfully convicted, and I'm proud to say that he does so.
So when you were released from prison, you had decided you weren't going to talk to any other journalists. You were going to make sure that Byron would be the first.
Yeah, I did that.
And that's where the line in the Tragically Hip song, Wheat Kings, a late-breaking story on the CBC, they're referring to Byron.
Well, that's quite possible. I never thought of that. I know right now it's a sad situation. And he came to see me, and he was a quiet, very soft-spoken person, and so was I at that point in my life, and I still believe that I am. I try to be anyway. But I felt like, wow, here's the Tragically Hip, and they're talking to me about wanting to put a song together. And I listened to the Tragically Hip music. I always listen to it, and the way he is, it's always it's a rock beat, and he's always moving around ideationally with his words and stuff. And he comes out with this beautiful ballad for me. And, I just, when I listen to that song, it just makes me feel, I don't know a good word for it, kind of at peace in a way. I really like those loons when it starts with the loons, because that was my dad's favorite bird, and my favorite bird. And
yeah. So I had wondered how the song had come about. I'd wondered if they had written the song and then contacted you, or if they spoke to you first and then. So you said Gord Downie came and met you, and that's where the inspiration for the song came from. Very interesting. Do you feel a lot of the lines in the song relate to you and your situation?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I remember at that point I was doing a documentary with a gentleman named Vic Sarin, and I was staying at Vic Sarin's place, and that's where I met them.
What I like about the song, and it's funny too, because I'm just going to share this with you, but I've listened to this song literally hundreds of times, and that's no exaggeration. I've always loved that song by Tragically Hip, and I've loved the band for years as well. But I've heard it in 4 different contexts now, like 4 different sets of ears, if you would. Like the first time I heard it, it was, oh, this is a cool hip song, cool song by the Hip, And then down the road, I found out what the subject matter was about you and your story. And then it took on a deeper meaning. I was kind of moved a lot more by it. And then I found out about Byron being the line late-breaking story on the CBC. It took on a new meaning. And then last night when I spoke to you, I don't know what it is, but I went back. I came home after work, and I sat down, and I put the headphones on, and I listened to the song about 3 or 4 times. And I sat down and I cried. And I had never felt that song at that level. I had never seen the sadness in that song the way I had seen it right there, and I'd never felt the pain like I had felt in that. And it was a beautiful feeling to experience that. But what gets me most about the song is the opening line and the final line. In the opening line, he says, "Sundown in the Paris of the prairies." I imagine him imagining you looking out your cell. Like that's the way I saw that line.
I need to say this, right, because it's true. There are so many people, and still, there are people that care about myself and my mother and my family, and to feel so emotionally. Canadians, are people that believe in what's right and just, and the fact that I would look around me and I would see so much love in people's faces for us is really a tribute to the people in the country that are believing in what's right and just. And, I really feel the need to say that because there are people now that will be listening to this podcast and they will think about that and they'll say, yes, I do believe in what's right and just. And it's an honorable thing to know that so many people in this country feel the way they do.
Yeah, and what I love about it too is the very last line. I didn't hear or even see that line the way I did until last night, and I realized that he just changes one word in there, and he all through it he says, "Let's see what tomorrow brings" in the chorus, and then in this one he says, "Wheat kings and pretty things. Oh, that's what tomorrow brings." So it gives a feeling of hope at the very end, and that's very moving, So, like, the way I see it all in the picture, now I might be totally off base, but you can tell me if I'm close or not. But the way I see it is that he's portraying your loneliness in prison, and seeing it and trying and being beaten down, but not giving up hope. And then at the very end saying, okay, tomorrow, yeah, it's going to be tomorrow. How does that for you?
It's the reality. Prison is a horrible place, and of course I felt lonely in there a lot. I think what people need to know is that there's so many people that are sitting right now in cells that are wrongfully convicted in Canada, and the system that's there that the Minister of Justice and the Justice Department have doesn't work. It is non-functional, and these people are not getting out of prison. And we do need, it's very important, an independent board of review that's going to take these cases and move them quickly, have them investigated, and once they can demonstrate for sure that a person is innocent, not guilty of anything, they can release them. They have the power to release them immediately. The present system is defunct. It's just a horrible way of trying to treat people that have been wrongfully convicted. Think about it yourself. If you were wrongfully convicted, Steve, and the process by which you are supposed to try to get out of prison doesn't work, it's like having the whole thing take place all over again. It's a horrible situation, and I speak out about it as much as I can, and it's important that I make that point on this podcast.
You've made a great point, and it's so wonderful that you decide to go out and to be a champion for these things, because no one would blame you if you just went off and said, look, let me leave my life now, and I went through enough pain, because I'm sure talking about it and going through a lot of that, it must trigger a lot of PTSD things and a lot of different bad memories. So you should be commended for the help that you are doing in that way, and just having your face out there really brings a lot of awareness. So thank you on behalf of Canadians.
I just kind of figure myself to be an ordinary person that would do the same thing themselves. The problem is every time that I go someplace or I do speak, I'm always having a mother come up to me and saying, my son is wrongfully convicted. And, I'm not just an ordinary human being. I can't really make a difference in those situations other than to just, kind of pass whatever I can onto these people to get them some kind of assistance or help. And I really, really feel the need to reach out right now to people that are listening. And, this is a problem because we really are talking about a man that has a great big heart, and that, here's the quickest way for me to kind of end up here with you. We're talking about Byron, but the bottom line is, if you're a person that's kind of stuck in a situation where you really have no hope and you don't know what to do, right? If you got Byron Christopher, trying to help you, right? Well, you got something happening for you and you got hope. That's the best way to kind of point out Byron. And I've had some good times with Byron. I'll probably have some better times with Byron. I hope I do. He needs to come and see me soon and bring down his canoe again, and we can go out canoeing with my kids. I think that would be a great idea.
Well, I hope you and your kids and him get to go to Campbellton someday, and he can take you up the Sugarloaf Mountain.
That would be great. That would be really, really good.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts about Byron and also your insight and thoughts about the song Wheat Kings, because as I say, I'm not kidding you, it's been one of my favorite Tragically Hip songs for years. Saying that the David Milgaard story had a happy ending wouldn't be quite accurate. There are some happy aspects to the ending, of course. David finally freed, exonerated, and then given a huge settlement by the Saskatchewan government. The Milgaard story, at least the ending, is bittersweet at best. Nothing could make up for 23 years of a living hell, and unjustly so at that. And then Fighting a system that doesn't lend itself well to overturning the wrongfully convicted. Consider the DNA evidence, for instance, that convicted Larry Fisher and exonerated David had only been saved because a prosecutor had wanted to write a book about the trial. DNA testing only became reliable in a court of law beginning in Britain in 1986. But in the 3 short conversations I had with David Milgaard, I learned a number of things, but this is what impressed me most. He never lost his humanity, in spite of all that he went through. And I think he's still a proud Canadian, and he's proud that Canadians supported him in his plight. I'm honored to have had David on the show, and I thank Byron Christopher for setting up that interview. I'd like to tell you I went out and dug and made lots of phone calls and worked till I got that interview, but that's not how it came about. It came about because of the friendship between Byron Christopher and David Milgaard. And again, I'm honored to have had that conversation and to have had that interview.